We look around and through the objects in front to see the mountain, Mont Saint Victoire. Paul Cezanne painted Mont Saint Victoire around 30 times. This one was completed in 1906, just before his death later that year. As the culmination of a life's work, it is deceptively simple, seemingly quickly rendered, although he painted it over a period of 2 years, so I guess he was having trouble finishing it or got distracted by other subjects. The colours are restful, the scene is restful, the style embodies Post-Impressionism. Impressionism was focused on getting down the visual perception of a scene by focusing on the effects of light, seeking naturalistic colours and thinking of shapes rather than objects, seeking the actual viewed effect, including the soft edges that make up most of our actual visual perception. Post-Impressionism, however, while incorporating many of the ideas of Impressionism, no longer relied on fully naturalistic colour, and in the case of Cezanne particularly, incorporated forms more geometrically, with harder edges. In some senses, Post-Impressionism is a return to the painting of objects rather than shapes, seen in paintings by Van Gogh, for example, where objects are even given outlines. We'll talk about the painting for a while, and then in this video, I want to talk about how depth is achieved in a painting. Although it is the furthest item in the painting, Cezanne has used every device to make the mountain itself the focal point. It is framed on either side by trees which provide visual barriers, keeping us in and leading us to the sunlit uplands, which themselves take us upward until we see the mountain. The mountain is the largest single object within the painting and is placed in a pleasing off-centre location, both horizontally and vertically. Nothing is in the mountain's way, and the sky behind it is indistinct, giving all the attention back to the mountain. There is a viaduct to the right, but the trees have done such an effective job of holding our attention within them that it in no way could be seen as important in the painting, let alone any kind of focal point. He did paint the viaduct in this one much earlier in 1895, where the mountain is now seen as a bit player, off in the distance, indistinct. But in our painting, the light spills all the way up the uplands, its geometric shapes reducing in size as we move away, being mere suggestions of fields, buildings and vegetation, all rendered in light colours, creating a golden visual pathway toward the towering limestone monolith. As befits the mountain's status and his post-impressionist thinking, Cezanne is less interested in rendering the mountain in its natural colours. Rather, he wants us to see the majesty and singularity of the epic rock. His colours include muted browns and purples, together with darker greys. These have been placed onto the surface in what looks like quick scrubbing motions of his brush, creating geometric slabs of subtly varying colour. The differing angles of each set of brush lines create a kind of zigzag of excitement that draws our attention away from the more ordered fields and rolling foothills below. Have you noticed how easily I'm using terms from the three-dimensional world? Distance, furthest, below. This is because Cezanne has tricked us into seeing 3 dimensions, and we readily share that reality without me having to describe a location in the painting by using 2-dimensional terms. I merely talk to you as if we were both standing out in the real world, looking at the distant mountain rising above the fields and hills. The painting has few strong light contrasts, and these are mostly to the sides and immediate front. Maybe these few, and this one, have been painted just a little darker than reality in order to catch our eye, this one contrasting well against a light field. After the trees have shepherded our eyes toward the centre, the stronger contrasts here grab our attention, leading us up on the golden pathway to Mont Saint Victoire. So yes, the painting appears to have depth. It's so obvious we might overlook it, but how has it been achieved on this 2-dimensional canvas? There are several methods employed: colour and value, object size, and definition. We know what colour is. Value refers to how dark or light something is. The further something is away from us, the more atmosphere, air and water vapour there is between our eyes and the object. The mountain of Saint Victoire is large, but we can tell that it is far away because the atmospheric effect has washed out or muted its colours, pushing them towards blue-tinged greys. In other words, the colours have become desaturated. At the same time, they have become lighter in value, compared to, say, the darker objects in the front that are nearer to us. Further, although the mountain may up close have dark shadows and grey limestone, any warmer colours it contains have moved towards violet or purple because of the effect of atmosphere. In the real world, distant colours lose first red, then yellow, as their longer, less energetic wavelengths get filtered out by the water vapour. Only the shorter wavelength, more energetic blues pushing their way through, but still losing power, making them more grey. We observe this effect so often in our life that we usually don't think about it. It's usually only artists whose intention is to transfer the three-dimensional world into two dimensions on a canvas who have to consider that although they may know that up close the mountain may well be darker, may well contain more red-brown, despite the grey limestone, be more defined, the real question is, what colour is it now that I'm actually looking at it from this vantage point? Paint what you see is at the same time the best and worst advice you can give an aspiring artist. Best advice, because if you actually paint what you see, continuing to look and put, without any regard to what you think may be right, at some point the picture almost magically appears, just as much a surprise to you as to anyone watching. But paint what you see is also the worst advice, because it turns out it is exceedingly hard to do this. It is not without foundation that many artists say they spent all of their artistic formative years just learning how to see. But Cezanne, unlike the Impressionists, has only done this to the extent required to help us place the mountain in the distance. Because the mountain is important to the painting, he has still endowed it with more colour than reality, post-impressionist thinking. Here's an example of, in my mind, a truer-to-life rendering of distant mountains. Indistinct edges, fuzzy blues and greys, getting lighter with distance. Everything you have learned through looking at the real world has been rendered here, and without even knowing why, you just recognise that these mountains are a long way away. Again, it's obvious, but it isn't always. The proper understanding of perspective and relative size of objects is often missing or distorted in very early art. It looks exceedingly strange to us, but is at least in part explained by the artist knowing, in inverted commas, what the objects were, instead of painting what they actually saw. We note that depth is achieved by the trees in front being bigger than the vegetation further back, as with buildings and the distance between fields. Cezanne has allowed his desire to make the mountain important overrule the usual depiction of atmospheric depth through soft edges. And don't let yourself be fooled by the photograph, which shows nice hard edges too. A photo taken with a tight shutter setting will render all edges crisp and clean. But we don't actually see like that. Our area of sharp focus is small. This is its own whole subject. Cezanne has used the other mechanisms to push the mountain into the distance. And to be fair to Cezanne, the mountain is not that far away. But again, compare the same mountain in his painting with Viaduct in the title. Now the colours, while still there, are more muted. The form of the mountain has soft or fuzzy internal edges. It's the same mountain, the same scene, but now the definition belongs to the strongly contrasted, hard-edged Viaduct. Back to our main painting. and the viaduct is indistinct, even though it's closer, and it is the mountain that seems more defined. Cezanne has been quite happy to play with these effects, not simply to achieve realism, which was not his main aim, but to emphasise what he saw as the point he was trying to make about the mountain. I'm sure many of you know these things, but if this is new to you, get into a gallery and see if you can pick what devices are being used by the artist to put us into his or her world. If you come across a Cezanne, like this one, spend a moment looking into the scene, feeling the wind, looking at the light, gazing at the mountain. A moment of shared reality, you and Cezanne, over a century apart. Well, it's hard to pitch the right level between stating the obvious and introducing new thoughts to an audience. So without knowing who you are, I just pictured it myself. I find this stuff interesting, so I'll talk about it. Anyway, there's nothing wrong with having your understanding if you already have it reconfirmed. If you like what I do, please subscribe, because there's a million paintings out there and I'm never going to get to the end of them. Anyway, see you next time.